Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emmy Birch, and today we are talking to the founder of The Critical Good, an arts education consultancy firm that is just so exciting, and my new friend, Allison Russo. In this conversation, we talk about values and value statements in our classrooms. We talk about classroom culture, and most importantly, we talk about not strategic planning, because that can be stressful, but how to plan on purpose so that your classroom is meeting the needs of your community, whatever that looks like. We also talk about imposter syndrome, and there's a lot of laughs in this one. Allison was such a fun conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Perform International. I can't thank them enough for sponsoring the show and making all of these episodes and conversations and new friend moments possible. All right, I think I've told you all the things. Oh, Patreon, don't forget, if you want more, jump over to patreon.com/musicedmatters. Also, like and review, that's really great. It's how people hear us, but that's enough. Let's hear about classroom culture, values, and so much more with my new friend, Allison Russo. Today, on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we are talking to my friend, Allison Russo. Hello, Allison.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you so much for doing this. I am so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is already a fantastic experience, like a couple minutes in.
Well, okay, listeners, what you don't know is, well, obviously, you know, I love people and I love talking to them, but we always start when I meet a new guest just talking before we push record. And I'm pretty sure Allison and I could have talked the whole hour without pushing record and just had a great little conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to reschedule, but like, right. We would have gone through a lot.
That was so much fun, just like our Hello, How's Life? So normally the Hello, How's Life is like 2 minutes, and we took a solid almost 15 because there was so much great stuff to talk about.
I know. We have lots of traveling to plan together.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so much fun. Okay, Allison, tell the listeners, who are you, what do you do, and how did you get there?
Well, based on our conversation from earlier, I feel like I needed to explain geographically where I'm from because we had a big geography conversation. So I am from the Hudson Valley of New York, from Kingston, New York, which is the original capital of New York State. Just a little fun twist
cool
there.
Cool
facts. And then the British burned it down. Whoops.
Oopsies.
Yes. So that's where I'm from. And then I did my undergrad at Ithaca College in music education. Obviously, that's why I'm here. And I'm a flute player. Don't hold it against me. That's just how I started. And so I play the flute. I also was a jazz singer in high school, which I kind of fell off once I went to college, but that'll come back to the story in a little bit. So I did my undergrad at Ithaca. And then when I graduated, I actually stayed in Ithaca and taught in public schools there.
Oh, cool.
Which was very interesting because some of my students, my band students, were the children of my professors from college, which was like no pressure whatsoever. It's, you know, my daddy is the horn professor at Ithaca College. Okay.
Better teach me how to do this right.
Right. But actually, all the professors' kids were just like the most cool and understanding parents because they understood what it was like to be a teacher and that they didn't want parents nitpicking the teachers. So they were like, sure, we trust you, which was actually the best. So I taught in Ithaca in the public schools for a number of years. And then, as I described to you before, I got stolen down to New Jersey. It's my husband's fault. And that's where I am now. I actually thought that I would not like New Jersey. I resisted it, but I actually have kind of fallen in love with it. And I was originally planning to go, back into public school teaching. And I decided to take a temporary summer job at a nonprofit located in Montclair. And then I didn't leave for 6 years.
Whoa! Summer job turned new career.
Yes, I was supposed to stay for 2 weeks to help out with summer camp. And then they said, well, we have an opening in our education department. And I said, let's give it a try. And so then for 6 years, I ran a number of programs there. And this was all jazz education. See, it came back. So I had this background in jazz. I knew enough to be able to have an intelligent conversation about it. I learned way more about jazz during those 6 years. And so I was running in-school programs. So I was still working with schools. I was hiring teaching artists to go into schools, primarily in Newark. This is also when I started to fall in love with the city of Newark. And I was also running a gender equity program called Chica Power at this organization. So I was I was referred to as like the queen feminist of the organization. That was my job, was like feminism. It was great. And so I stayed for 6 years. And when the pandemic hit, it just didn't make any sense for me to stay anymore. So at that point, I spent some time momming really hard, so hard that I made a second kid. During the pandemic.
That's my new favorite line. I mommed so hard I made a second kid.
Yes. So had our second child during the pandemic, which was a real experience.
Whoa.
And during that time, trying to figure out, okay, what is next? And started dabbling in doing some consulting, and then and some writing, and decided to make it official in like the fall of 2021. And that was when the Critical Good was born. And that's what I'm doing now.
Oh my gosh, what a fun story. And I love all the little circles that keep looping back that you never know what's going to loop back.
Oh God, I know. It's all the stuff that you learn in your undergrad. Don't throw away any of those binders. Like, do you know how much stuff I threw away that I'm like, no, I needed that. I can't find it now.
Don't tell me that. I'm trying to purge this summer. I have a friend who is a professional organizer, and she said, educators are information hoards. And yes. I felt very seen, very, very, very yes. seen, very stressed and very seen.
I agree that like we keep maybe too many things, but the things that you get rid of are the things that you're going
to need.
No.
Yes, I feel that.
I mean, when I was working at that nonprofit, I ended up subbing for a middle school general music class, which was so far out of my realm that I was like, oh man, I know I have some material somewhere for my undergrad. Gone. And I was just totally like, gone. No, I have to. No, so yes, the hoarding is real.
It's a real thing. Okay, so you decide you're going to go into consulting. Blah, 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 blah. I was trying to say something else at the same time. Guess the coffee's kicking in. So you start the Critical Good.
Yes.
What does it do? What is the Critical Good?
So as the Critical Good, I say we, but it's really just me.
I do that all the time.
I know. I call it my solo act. I've gone solo, right? So I do work with schools and nonprofits, and I do work that is focused on what I like to call equitable music education. So under that umbrella of equitable music education, I do work through the lenses of culturally responsive pedagogy and educational psychology. And to me, kind of where those things come together is like equitable social and emotional learning. It is classroom culture. It is obviously diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that all intersects in the music room, where we often are trying to do good, right? We're trying to do good things. We carry this like flag of music education for all. But so often it's so steeped in so many hundreds of years of tradition that if you don't look at it critically, then you're just doing something that feels nice and isn't necessarily good, beneficial to everyone. So that's where the name of the company comes from. It's that you're not just doing good, you're not just doing nice, fun, fluffy, happy stuff. You're doing things that are revolutionary, things that are critically needed for critical populations. You're breaking the wheel and critiquing yourself and your own beliefs and your own assumptions about what is important or what is music education in order to really serve everyone on a deep, true level. That's the nutshell.
I love it. So when you're out there working with schools, are you doing workshops? Are you providing resources? What are the tools and things that you're doing to help people break that wheel and be revolutionary?
Yes. So yeah, that all sounds like cool and philosophical, but it's like, okay, then what is it? So it's a couple of things. So I have a book. Woo!
Congratulations.
Thank you. It came out in March of this year.
It never gets old seeing it on a shelf. Mine's only like a year old. And every time I see it on the shelf, I'm like,
yeah, it's like, oh, it's real. Like I have a box of them and I just kind of stare at them and I'm like, I wrote a book. And
I do that all the time.
I can't stop touching it. It's amazing. So I wrote a book called Planning on Purpose, Creating a Values-Based Music Program. And the book itself is created for music teachers to go through this process on their own. But when teachers or entire school districts or music departments or education departments of a nonprofit want to like revamp their music program, there's like a 3-step process that I go take people through on the planning on purpose process. There's a lot of P words.
I love a good alliteration. That's how you know you're in the classroom.
Yes.
Speak in alliterations.
It's got to be catchy, people. So basically the 3-step process is data collection, because I'm also a really big data nerd. I know that people kind of like recoil at the thought of data, but this is like friendly, ethical data, not soul-sucking devil data. And they're both exist. So the data collection is
soul-sucking data. I'm sitting over here thinking like, numbers are soul sucking.
Well, truly though, data can be used unethically. People can gather this information and make all of these assumptions and twist things into the way that they want their story to be told. And it's not benefiting the people whose information that you just gathered. You're using their information against them. This is a rant for another.
I love it. No, this is so good. This is what podcasts are for. So you can have these awesome conversations like we'd have over a cup of coffee face to face.
Right. And you're like, I have 17 rants in here, but I'm going to try to stay on task here.
Okay. So first you collect
some information. What you're trying to glean is, what are the values that my students and their families have? So my entire community has about education, about music, and about music education. So what is important to them when it comes to music education? Some communities, here's a great example, really find competition really important. They really want to feel like they're getting an award for something. They really want to be recognized. They want to have something to put on their college application. And that's what's really important to a community. And so a music department can adapt to those important values. Meanwhile, there might be a community that really is more interested in emotional expression or a social justice work that surrounding music education. And then maybe that can be more of a focus for a music department. And some teachers kind of can get that sort of organically, but if you don't take a time out and ask the question, you won't really ever know. And if you have younger students, you don't do it as a survey, you do it as more of a town hall style thing where you kind of just get information, but you're also talking to the adults and trying to get this information from the full community. So, and you're also finding out from your students, what's the vibe in our classroom right now? What's working for you? What's not working for you? If you suspect that evening concerts just aren't working for your community, let's figure out what does work. So that first step is all about taking time to really listen to your community and try to get some questions answered so that you can then make the correct steps in steps 2 and 3.
I love that.
It's not scary data.
It's the good stuff. It's asking the right questions and figuring out what's important, especially related to music and music ed. That's so, you get to know your communities and that's so cool. Yeah. And I had never thought about it like that with competition. Okay. If that's step 1, what's step 2?
Step 2 is dreaming really big. And this is all about sloughing off the idea of a deficit thought process where, listen, this is real life that music departments, unless you're in Texas, are not flush with cash. right? Like we usually can't, it's not like asking you shall receive, right? And so it's very easy for arts teachers of all kinds to get into this mindset of like, I should be poor, like I should not have enough. I should be young, scrappy, and hungry for my whole career. Like, no. When you're doing the step 2 of the process and we're thinking about an abundance mindset where, okay, what really needs to happen, and we'll figure out how to get there later, but let's figure out what really needs to happen based on the values that you've gleaned in the first set of steps. So you're looking at the data that you've gathered, you're gleaning it into a value statement for your program, and then you're making decisions based on those values instead of just like, oh, it would be nice if we had a bucket drumming group. Like, but why? I ask why so many times.
Oh my God. Do you know the 5 whys? It's like a thing with business. My running partner and I were talking about it this morning.
Oh, yes, where you ask why and then why and then why. Yes, I do that exact process.
That's so good.
Yes, it's so good. It makes you want to like, whoever's asking you why, you want to like punch them in the face because you're like, well, just because is not good enough. It's not good enough. Right. And yeah, so I do a lot of like, okay, but what is that based on? Is that based on a tradition that is just peer pressure from dead people? Like, or is it based on what your community actually needs, like their unique interests and desires and expectations? Or is it just based on, well, I have the books already? That's not a reason to do a thing. If you just open your cabinets and say, okay, well, I have glockenspiels. I guess we're learning about glockenspiels. You're not really planning on purpose. You're just planning to survive. Understandable, but we can do better. So that second step is all about like the removing the limitations of music education and looking at the reality of your community and then making a plan based on those values and realities.
Remove the limitations. And what did you say after that? Make a plan based on the reality?
Yeah, something like that.
That's so good. You have some good quotes already. My quote page is already filled up. I don't know which ones I'm going to pick. That's the hardest part.
I try to be a good, soundbite. It's not easy.
Well, it's great conversation. And I'm really excited about your book. I think that is such a fantastic resource. And I'm assuming that you then go in either with the book or with aspects from this book. Cause that's what I do with my book. Like the whole book is great. We wrote it, but there's different chapters that can be pulled out for workshops and sessions and individual work. And that sounds like such a great resource for our community.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a process that teachers can do by themselves in a course of like 7 months, like 4 if you're really intense about it, but like you can do it in a school year. But when I do it with a school district and there's like, it's a lot more complicated because now you're trying to like do this vertical alignment and there's a lot more cooks in the kitchen. So it takes like 2 school years.
Oh my gosh.
Because
we didn't do, I ADHD'd. We didn't do what the third step was.
Yes. The third step. Okay. So you figured out where you are, you figured out where you're going to go. And the third step is figuring out how you're going to get there. And so this is a big soapbox of mine because, okay, I'll tell you a secret.
Because I love secrets.
Which is silly because we're on a podcast and like people are going to hear this. But the original title of my book was Strategic Planning for Music Teachers. But people recoil at the thought of strategic
planning is a stressful 2 cent. Like that's strategic planning. Ugh.
So, but it is
strategic planning.
But I have a real problem where strategic plans. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just always want to check. I don't want to make more editing for you.
I click the little button that says it could be explicit just because it makes it easier.
Okay. Where most strategic plans shit the bed is making the plan and then it gets put in a drawer and nobody looks at it ever again. right?
Amen.
And then you've just wasted your time. You've had a really great conversation for like several months, and then literally nothing happens. And it makes me want to scream because their strategic plans are so optimistic and they're so full of hope. And we're going to do all these great things. And then literally nothing happens. And you know why? Because people get too optimistic and they think that they can do all these things and say yes to everything, but they are not realistic about being a human.
Mm-hmm.
So the last step is about looking at where are the gaps? Okay, maybe I do want to start a bucket drumming group. Okay, how are you going to get there? Okay, I need to get funding for bucket drumming. Okay, before that, I need to figure out where I can get funding for bucket drumming. Okay, before that, I need to learn how to write a grant. So like all of those steps that need to happen. And then you literally, there's a chart where you plug in, here are the things that are happening in my life that I'm anticipating. I'm getting knee replacement surgery. I'm getting married. I'm going to be on maternity leave. I'm buying a new house. I'm taking a graduate course.
I'm momming so hard I got a second kid. I'm just never going to let you forget that quote.
So, and then you can work around your life. So you're not having unrealistic expectations of like, oh, yes, I'm going to start a new after school program while I'm finishing my master's degree. Do not do that. You cannot do that.
You shouldn't do that. And I think that this is the conversation that you were kind of hinting around earlier, is we as music educators, especially, I know everybody does this in their own way in every career, but for whatever reason, we have this desire to just run ourselves into the ever-loving ground. And that has to stop.
Yes. Yes. Before I left the classroom, I always kind of had a vision in my mind that I would just die on the podium. That I would just do it until I could not physically do it anymore. Mm-hmm. Like for folks in the marching band world who know George Parks, and when he passed away, he literally passed away at a marching band at a football game. And I know he died doing what he loved. But I don't want to die on the podium. I don't have to do that.
You know who said that the first time to me? It was early on. It was Derek. He used to work in up in the north, over in that all those states that all look the same to me because it's not the East Coast. But he said, I'm going to retire and spend time with my kids. And no one else who was super successful in our field had ever just said it that bluntly.
Yeah.
Like you have to. It's so important. And then I'm going to do something else.
Yeah.
Like that sounds amazing. I mean, I don't want to retire right now. I love what I'm doing. And I know you love what you're doing.
Have fun when when you're like willing and able to do it. But like we have seasons of our lives. And that's like I was saying before, like I need to accept that I'm momming really hard right now. My kids are little and it takes up a lot of my time. And I enjoy momming really hard, but I'm not I think that I work full time, but no, I'm spending a lot of my time being a parent and being a wife and taking care and moving our freaking houses right now.
But what a perfect thing, like that third step being, how am I going to do this realistically? And I love this quote, be realistic about being human. And that chart sounds incredible because so often, especially with strategic planning, so often it's like, okay, here's how we're getting there. But then you don't take the moment to put it in the calendar and just put it in the calendar with what's going on in school life.
Yes.
Nonetheless, you're acknowledging what's going on in life.
Yes, exactly. Because you don't have to. Like, there's no gold star for being as the most stressed out music teacher. We think because we see other programs like what the Joneses are doing, right? Where it's like the program one district over, they're doing this. You don't know what's happening outside of their classroom. You don't know what their family life is like. You don't know what they're giving up. Maybe they're giving up something that you're not willing to give up. And I make this analogy in the book where I I go through these phases every once in a while where I'm like, maybe I'll be a person who wears makeup. Like maybe I should just be like a person who gets up and wears makeup, because like it sounds like a fun thing to do. And like maybe there's a little peer pressure. It sounds like, but and I know for some people, they're like, would not leave the house without makeup. And that, that's all our own preferences. But sometimes
just had this conversation this morning. Like, what is the point of makeup? Like, why is it a thing?
Yeah. But so sometimes I find it interesting. But then when it comes down to it, I'm like, I don't think I would rather spend my money on something else. Or like, okay, I know it would involve waking up like maybe 10 minutes earlier in the morning, but I'm like, I think I would just rather sleep. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. Like there's no reason that it's perfectly fine that somebody else decides that they want to wake up an hour earlier each morning to do their makeup in an elaborate way. They find that that's a more important value to them than it is to get that hour of sleep. Whatever that means about them, quote unquote, is fine, whatever. I would rather do other things. They would rather do that thing. And sometimes you just have to accept like, this is more important to me than that thing. And that's fine.
And that's so important. I mean, I know we haven't even yet talked about classroom culture, but I think as we're talking about these 3 steps of, the who, what, how, it's also that acknowledging, because if you acknowledge that everybody has these different values and that's okay, doesn't that give you the freedom of not living in stinking imposter syndrome?
Yes.
There's no one to imposterize. I made up that word. That's not a real word. Don't tell anybody. Yeah. But I guess if you make up words, you're a real genius. I'm just going to keep telling myself that. But there's no one to feel like you're impostering if you're just doing you. And that's such a great concept, just from be realistic about being human.
Right. Yeah. It's just, there's a lot of pressure and traditions that music teachers have of, well, this is what I was taught in my undergrad, or even, this is how my mentor did it, somebody who's really important to me, or this book that I really love, this is how they do it. Or this is how the district does it, down the road. There's a lot of comparison. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of wanting to have your thing to stand out. And it just doesn't always make sense. And here's a great example of that. I don't think I put this in the book, but this is a thing that like haunts me at night. When I was teaching in Ithaca, there was another band director at one of the other elementary schools who has since retired. And her thing that like made her stand out was that she had a mariachi group, which was cool. Like nobody around had mariachi in their school, in their band programs. It was very interesting. I remember in like my first couple of years, like helping her out with mariachi band. And she's like, oh, could you come play trumpet? I play the flute, but like I could play trumpet better than her kids could play trumpet because they were in 4th and 5th grade. And I remember like going, like helping out with the mariachi band and just being like, I don't think this makes any sense, because she was not Hispanic or Latina. Her students weren't Latino. Nobody was Mexican. Nobody asked for this. And it was just an entire like cultural mismatch. And I was like, who's this for? And it really felt like trying to put a round peg in a square hole, or square peg in a round hole, whatever it is.
That works the same.
It just didn't make any sense. And I'm like, I'm not saying that like learning about mariachi or like doing a mariachi ensemble isn't beneficial, even if nobody in the situation is Mexican. It's a fantastic, genre of music. But it was just so arbitrary that she couldn't get anybody to join it. The music was not accessible to her students. It was just like, what's happening here? It was just so bizarre, and it was completely unsuccessul. It just didn't make any sense.
It didn't start with the 3 steps, and that makes so much sense.
She never asked anybody, like, are you interested? It was just, this was a thing that just made her stand out and be unique. And, she could teach other music teachers about mariachi, but we're like, but we don't have a Mexican population. And why is this like such a large part of your band program? And your kids like cannot play the trumpet.
It's
like, I don't understand what's happening.
You have to go through those processes. And it really does lead perfectly into classroom culture. Because if you're thinking about it, we're talking right now about how it's about the human, and you are the human that we're talking about. Like, yes. you are the only you there is. You are the human in front of your classroom. And these have to be your decisions, your big dreams, your house to make it happen, your connective to life. So let's talk, how does that tie into this classroom culture idea? Like, you've done all this work, and now how do we drive it home?
Right. So I talk a lot about how our classrooms are so much more than our curriculum, right? We, in our undergrad,
to write that down because I'm flipping the page. I'm out of space. A good one. Our classrooms are so much more than our curriculum.
There's so much emphasis in our undergrad work, and even from our administration when we're teachers, of like, well, what's in your curriculum? What's in your lesson plan? What's in, what are you teaching the students? What will they be able to do? But what gets lost in the shuffle is our students' actual experience of the classroom, right? And that's stuff that like doesn't go in your lesson plan necessarily. There are some things, but the classroom culture is all of the kind of unspoken, sometimes spoken, things that happen between the curriculum. So the curriculum is like the bricks of your classroom. The culture is the mortar that sticks everything together, right? So that includes things like the rules and norms in your classroom. So that's like the policies. I rant very loudly and frequently about dress codes, like concert dress codes. I will scream about that until my voice is hoarse. Traditions and rituals that you have in your classrooms, the power dynamics that are going on in your classroom and even outside your classroom, the general philosophy that you have, how you think about your students. What's kind of like the vibe in your classroom? Is it high energy all the time? Is it competitive? Is it really serious and kind of like morose almost? What's the physical space that you have? Who's represented on the walls of your classroom? All of these things are whispering in your students' ears about what is important in this class, right? So, here's a really simple one: is if all of the posters in your classroom are all white guys, that's screaming at your kids who are not white guys, which is probably a lot of them.
I feel that way about concert programs. Like, if that's all you have on your concert program, what is that telling the audience?
Right. That music is dead white guys. And I think we all know that that's not true, but somehow we expect music in schools to be dead white guys, and that's okay. But out in the real world, quote unquote, we know that music is expansive. Like, where does Cardi B fit in? Is that not music? I'm not saying that Cardi B has to be like central to our curriculum, but she's still a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to be realistic about if oh, okay. How much of a soapbox do I want to go on right now? If we live in a capitalistic society and we're concerned that our students need to have a college or career outcome for every class, shouldn't we be realistic about what the college and career options are for our students and how many ways there are to make music your career that aren't even remotely mentioned or whispered in schools, and how you can enjoy music for the rest of your life using money or not using money? Also not addressed. Just completely absent.
That's so important. That's why I love interviewing people like you on the podcast, because we are able to show all the different ways that you can use the degrees we chose. But there's also a million other ways to use music and to explore music. And it's so inspiring. So if someone's listening and thinking, okay, I got the bricks, but I need to work on the mortar. Right. What is your advice for that?
Oh, Well, after you buy my book. No, I'm kidding.
Yes. Not a shameless plug, but an absolute plug. Buy the book.
Yes. So I think an important step and the hardest step is a lot of self-reflection and self-examination and critique. I actually call it interrogation, where we do that. We were just talking about the 5 whys, where you say, okay, it's important to me that students know about Bach. Okay, why? Because he was a very important composer. Okay, well, why is that important? If you can't go past that first why, you need to really examine what it is that your own motivations are. Knowing your own values is a key part of that process as well. And I have all sorts of resources for like just kind of looking at what are my own values. And that's always a very eye-opening thing for a lot of teachers to say, okay, let me be very clear about what's important to me. Because if you haven't slowed down to do that before, you're going to uncover some things that you might even be uncomfortable about.
Mm-hmm. And it's so hard to take time. Like going back to like the go that we are as musicians, that's expected. Like it's gig season, go. Like we don't even get a Christmas holiday because we're too busy singing in a million. And don't get me started on Holy Week.
I was about to say,
it's supposed to be a reflective week. Like every Holy Week, I get to Monday, Thursday. I'm like, yes, it's going to be a reflective Holy Week. And by the time I'm at Easter Vigil on Saturday night and then Easter on Sunday morning,
how to read treble clef.
I'm like, what am I doing? I think I'm tired. Is this how I reflect? But it's such. I mean, we have to acknowledge that first, and then really take time for the values. I'm so excited to have made friends with you. I feel like we could talk all day long.
We could. It would be dangerous.
We're going to have to stay in contact with all of this. You've given us 3 great points that will take time. They need to buy your book, like just period. We're not going to give them anything else. They got to buy the book. You've given us the first step in moving towards creating the correct culture. And I'm so glad that it's not just culture looks like XYZ. It's culture is from you outward. And it's that interrogation, which should be scary.
It should be scary. If you're not afraid of it, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it. I'm sorry. It's one of those, like with acting, if you don't feel a little bit ridiculous, you're kind of doing it wrong. Like stage acting, like you got to like be a little bit too much. It's got to be, if you're not interrogations are not friendly. Like they're a little bit like, okay, but what?
So scary. I mean, I said the same thing in a vocal coaching yesterday. I had a student who was just singing so gorgeously, but I'm like, you're not awkward enough for this to sell. Like, come on. You got to sell it to me.
Right. Yes. There's a lot of obsession of like toxic positivity culture where it's like, well, I shouldn't feel bad at any point. Like, no, it's important for us to have emotions that are uncomfortable because they keep us safe, right? Like you sometimes should feel scared. If you don't feel scared, you're not going to run when the lion comes, right? Like you're physical, literal or metaphorical lion, right? Like, and you know what? If you uncover something about yourself that's like an icky, uncomfortable, maybe you have a racist thought that's like rattling around in your head or something that's ableist or sexist or whatever-ist. And you just go, oh, no. And you want to like push it away and say, okay, I never thought that. It never happened. Like that's a normal human reaction to think, okay, I've uncovered something about myself that's really unpleasant. I want it to like kill it dead, kill it with fire, right? Mm-hmm. Acknowledge that you've had this icky thought and come to it with some curiosity, like, oh, where does that thought come from? Like, where did, and then you go, oh, I remember somebody in my upbringing, like really pushed this into me, or I saw this movie, or I, had this experience, and this is why I think XYZ uncomfortable, icky thing. Okay, well, now that I know that that's where that's coming from, I can behave differently. Even though that icky thought might stick to you for a little bit, you can behave differently. Now that you've kind of uncovered it. But if you don't uncover it, then you're just
interrogate first.
Do icky things.
Yes. Allison, this is so fun. And you're giving us so much. This is great.
Oh, thank you.
All right. I hate to say it, but we have to go to the end of show questions.
No. Okay.
I want to talk forever, but we've covered some great stuff, including the 3 things when you're looking at culture, the cultural good. We even talked about how you got that name, which is awesome. We've talked about values and value statements and why we do things in our classrooms. And we've talked about classroom culture, and I'm loving all these metaphors.
Oh, thank you.
So this is going to be so good. All right. I don't think we're going to talk about what book you're reading right now because I want to really plug your book. So tell us one more time, what's the title of your book and where can they find it?
Okay. The title of the book is called Planning on Burping. No. Okay.
Momming so hard. Momming so hard
I'm
right now.
so hard I can't even think. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. The title of the book is Planning on Purpose, Creating a Values-Based Music Program. You can get an ebook version of it from F-Flat Books, and you can get a printed copy of it from Amazon. And if you join the pacing groups that I host that are coming up in the fall and that I host like every couple of months, that will keep you on track through the entire process. So you don't just buy the book and go, boy, I hope I do this. You can actually have a pacing group with you.
Cool.
And you're the only people who can get the very sexy, full color, lay flat deluxe version of the book.
Whoa. Okay. How do people join the pacing groups?
You go to my website, thecriticalgood.com, and you'll click on the book tab and you'll get more information there.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Okay. Who or what is inspiring you right now? What really matters to you right now?
Oh, that was like 3 different questions. That's not fair.
I know. It's a toughie. We've got to see what comes out.
Okay. What is inspiring me right now? I wish I had thought about this more, and so I'm not.
No, you don't have to at all. It's totally fine.
You know what is kind of like stuck in my craw right now is...
That's exactly what we want to know.
Is Dr. Bettina Love's idea from her book, We Want to Do More Than Survive. One of the ideas in that book is about how the word grit is racist and how it's usually referring to people who have needed to be gritty and tenacious their entire lives for generations in order to survive. And then we're saying that they need to like buckle down and get more serious. It's like, no, grit is in our DNA is what she likes to say. And that's just been something that has been sticking to me recently about how we think about our students who we think are not good enough or not trying hard enough. Flipping that narrative and being more respectful of not just the journey of the people in front of us, but their entire cultural history. That's what is something that's stuck in my craw. Dr. Bettina Love.
That's perfect. That's exactly what that question is for. Or like, yes. What sparks you?
And I got a book title in there too.
And you did. You got a bonus book title. All right. Last question. What is the one thing that really matters that you want the listener to walk away from this conversation with?
Okay. Do what works for you and your community. Do what works. I'm just really tired of teachers trying to do things that they think they're supposed to do or should do because somebody else said that it might be a good idea. And they're just like throwing everything at the wall and seeing what will stick. Like, take a time out, figure out what is actually needed, and then do what works, not what you think might be cool.
That's so good. Do what works. And that's perfect. Tying into Jen Rafferty's episode. Yes. Episode 164, because one of her quotes was, stop shooting on yourself.
Yes. Yes. Because I actually, so because I know Jen, I like say that to myself sometimes. I'm just like, I'm shooting on myself real hard right now. And I need to think about what I actually need to do rather than what I think I'm supposed to do, because usually that's not even remotely correct.
So good.
Do what works.
Oh my gosh. It's so good. So good. Allison, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me and recording our ridiculous conversation.
It was perfect.
Good.
I want to reiterate what she said. Do what works for your community. I tell you every episode that you matter. And you're the only one that matters in your community. So look in that mirror and be proud of who you are and show up for whatever it is the community needs in front of you. And if you're not sure what that is, Allison gave you some great tools for how to get started. And if you need more, I'm always here for you. Just let me know. You can find me on social media. You can check out the website, emilybirch.org/contact. You can check us out on Patreon and get direct lines of communications and requests, whatever you need. You matter. You matter. We all know that music matters, especially the critical good. And I'll see you next time on the Music That Matters podcast.